Hey, listeners, you ready to dive deep into some small talk secrets?
I think everyone's always looking for ways to feel more comfortable, more confident in those kind of everyday social situations.
Totally. And honestly, who couldn't use a little boost in the small talk department, right?
Absolutely. It's one of those things that can feel a little intimidating, a little awkward, but it's a skill, really, like anything else.
I like that. Okay, so the source material we've been diving into has some really practical advice on breaking the ice without it being super cringy.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Okay, so one thing that stood out was using compliments to start a conversation.
Mm.
But get this, with a playful twist.
Okay, I am intrigued. Like what? Give me an example.
All right, so instead of just, saying nice shoes,
Mm.
you could say something like, those shoes are amazing. Are they fast enough to outrun your responsibilities?
Okay, I see what they did there. I like that.
That's unexpected, right?
Yeah, it is. It's playful. It kind of injects that little bit of humor, which can be so disarming.
For sure. And speaking of finding that common ground, the source also talks about like using your surroundings as a way to spark a conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that shared experience.
Right. So say you're at a party, you could be like, this music is kind of wild. Have you ever heard this band before?
It's easy. It feels natural because you're both right there experiencing it.
Exactly. Okay, now let's talk about those awkward silences
Oh.
because, oh boy, we've all been there. The source actually says we shouldn't fear the silence, which is easier said than done, I think.
Well, it's true. It's so easy to get flustered, but sometimes, honestly, silence can be an opportunity, to gather your thoughts. Sometimes it's even like a natural pause in the conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Right. And if you do find yourself like grasping for something to say, the source talks about this thing called the F4D technique.
The 4D technique, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it stands for family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. And basically, those four areas, you can kind of use them as springboards for new topics.
Oh, that's smart. So if you're drawing a blank, you can mentally run through those categories, see what sparks an idea, like, do you have any exciting vacations coming up? That kind of thing.
There you go, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like having a little mental cheat sheet for smooth conversation.
Okay, I love it. That's brilliant. Now, something else that the source dives into that I thought was interesting is like how cultural differences play into small talk. What we might think is totally normal chit-chat here could be like a huge faux pas somewhere else.
Oh, 100%. Cultural context is everything. What's considered appropriate varies so much.
They gave the example of talking about work, like here in North America, it's totally normal. But in some European countries like France or Italy, it's not really a go-to small talk topic.
It's true, and it just highlights how important it is to be mindful, respectful of those nuances.
Yeah, totally. So how do you even navigate that? It's not like you can be expected to know the social etiquette of every single culture.
Well, you can't know everything. But honestly, even a little research goes a long way. If you know you'll be interacting with people from a specific background, take some time to familiarize yourself. What's considered polite conversation, their customs, that sort of thing, it makes a world of difference.
It's like, learning a few key phrases in another language before you travel.
Yeah.
Shows that respect, that willingness to connect.
It does. And it can really help prevent those awkward misunderstandings.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, it's not just what we say, it's how we say it, right? The source talks about the importance of body language.
It's huge. It's like they say, it's not always what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly.
Huh.
But in this case, it's also about how you don't say it.
Right, exactly. Those nonverbals, they speak volumes.
So true.
The source really emphasizes good eye contact. Not too much, we don't want to stare anyone down, but not too little either, and maintaining that open posture.
It's about finding that balance between being engaged and, intensely staring someone down.
Right, and don't underestimate a genuine smile.
Oh, for sure. A smile goes a long way.
Yeah.
But I imagine, like everything else, it's about finding that balance, right? You don't want to be walking around with, a plastered-on grin the whole time.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, authenticity. People can spot a fake a mile away. Just be present. Be genuinely interested in the interaction.
That makes so much sense. Now, speaking of authenticity, the source talks about using a little self-deprecating humor to break the ice. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's great. I mean, admitting to a small flaw, in a lighthearted way, of course, can instantly make you more relatable. It puts people at ease.
Totally. It's like saying, hey, look, I'm not perfect either, which hopefully makes other people feel more comfortable too.
Right, humanizes you. But yeah, like with everything, keep it light. Steer clear of anything too controversial, too personal.
Okay, good advice. So we talked about the how, but what about the what? What are some good topics to chat about? Things that aren't too personal, too controversial, safe, but engaging.
Well, the source recommends sticking to some classics like movies, music, books, travel, things that most people have some experience with, an opinion on.
Basically anything that get a conversation going, but won't start a debate at a dinner party.
Exactly. It's about finding that common ground. And, sometimes the simplest questions can lead to the most interesting conversations.
You know what that reminds me of, actually? Something else the source mentioned about those awkward silences. The power of asking open-ended questions.
Right. Those open-ended questions are key. Instead of just those yes or no questions, you really encourage people to open up and share, and you never know where the conversation might go.
It's true. It becomes way more interesting than just like lobbing a quick question back and forth.
Totally. And speaking of navigating the conversation, the source had some good advice on how to, gracefully exit a conversation when you need to.
Oh, that's a good one. Because sometimes you need an escape route. Even from like perfectly nice small talk.
Yeah.
How do they suggest you bow out gracefully?
Well, they say it helps to have a couple of polite phrases kind of ready to go.
Oh, smart. Like what?
You could say something like, well, it was so nice chatting with you, but I promised myself I'd catch up with, and then maybe mention someone else at the event.
Before they disappear.
Exactly.
Or even just a classic like, oh, excuse me, I need to refresh my drink. Or, excuse me, I need to make a quick phone call.
Perfect examples. You're acknowledging the person, you're giving a reason, but you're moving on.
I like it because it's not like making up some elaborate excuse either.
Right? Just polite and to the point.
So much better. We've touched on it a couple of times, but the source really seems to stress the importance of body language.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, you can say all the right things, but if your body language is off.
Total mixed messages.
Exactly.
What do they say to do?
Well, they were really emphasizing being mindful of your posture.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like, even if you're genuinely interested in the conversation, if you're standing there with your arms crossed, it kind of sends that signal that you're closed off.
So are we supposed to walk around with our arms wide open all the time?
Maybe not all the time, but yeah, you want to maintain that open posture, facing the person, maybe using your hands while you talk.
It's like we were saying earlier, just being present and authentic.
Right. And you know what else they mention?
What's that?
Mirroring.
Mirroring. Is that like looking in a mirror?
Not quite. It's more about subtly reflecting the other person's body language.
Oh, okay.
So if they lean in, you might subtly lean in. If they use a certain hand gesture, you might find yourself doing something similar. It can be really, really subtle.
It's like a way of saying, hey, we're on the same page here without actually saying it.
Exactly. But, no need to mimic their every move.
Right. We want to be in sync, not freak anyone out.
Exactly. Now, we talked before about using humor, and I think this is a good place to circle back to that.
Okay, yeah, because humor can be tricky.
It really can. It's so subjective. What's hilarious to one person could be totally offensive to someone else,
For sure. So how do you use humor well without, like, putting your foot in it?
The source really stressed reading the room, knowing your audience.
Right. What you joke about with your best friend?
Totally different than what's appropriate for a work function. And they also really emphasize self-deprecating humor, again, especially in those initial interactions.
It shows you don't take yourself too seriously.
Exactly. But again, even with self-deprecating humor, keep it lighthearted. Nothing too personal, too critical.
Right. Save the deep stuff for later.
Exactly. So I'm curious, from your experience, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see people making when it comes to small talk?
Ooh, good question. I think one of the biggest ones is just overthinking it. People get so caught up in trying to say the right thing that they end up stumbling over their words or just coming across as insincere.
It's so true. It's like, just be yourself. But that's easier said than done sometimes.
For sure. So practice, practice, practice.
Exactly. The more you do it, the more natural it becomes.
Like anything, right?
Absolutely. And I think another mistake is making it all about yourself. At the end of the day, small talk is about connection, making the other person feel heard.
It's not just about waiting for your turn to talk. It's about actually listening.
Yes. Ask questions. Really listen to the answers. People can tell when you're genuinely engaged, and that makes all the difference.
It's like that saying, be interested, not interesting.
Oh, I like that. Because when you shift your focus from what am I going to say next to I wonder what I can learn from this person, it takes the pressure off, and it's just more enjoyable for everyone involved.
I love that. So it's not about avoiding small talk altogether. It's about shifting your perspective on it. It can be this opportunity to connect, to learn something new.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive on small talk, is there anything else that stood out to you from the source material? Anything you think our listeners should keep in mind as they go forth and conquer their small talk fears?
I think more than anything, be kind to yourself. Small talk, it can be awkward, it can be clunky, but everyone feels that way sometimes.
It's so true. We're all just kind of figuring it out as we go.
Exactly. And, don't be afraid to embrace those awkward moments. They happen.
It's true. Sometimes those unscripted moments are the best ones.
Absolutely. Another thing I would say is be curious. Go into conversations wanting to learn something.
Ooh, I like that. So it's not about performing, it's about being open to whatever comes up.
Yeah. Whether you learn something about the person or their perspective, even just like a fun fact, that shift in mindset can make a big difference. It really can. It's like it takes the pressure off of you too. Because if you're genuinely interested, the conversation just flows.
Exactly. You're not so worried about saying the perfect thing. You're just present, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive on small talk, is there anything else from what we talked about, from the source material, that you really want to emphasize for our listeners?
There was one more thing I wanted to mention. The source talked about this idea of using small talk as like a bridge to more meaningful connection, even cultural understanding. I thought that was really
Oh,
interesting.
that's a great point. It's not just about like surface level chit chat.
Right. It can be this starting point for deeper conversation, for challenging our own assumptions, for connecting with people who are different from us.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. That is a really powerful way to think about it. It's not just about mastering a social skill. It's about, like you
Right.
said, creating understanding.
In connection.
Exactly. I love that. So, to our listeners out there, remember, embrace the awkward, be curious, and never underestimate the power of a good conversation, no matter how small.
You got this.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.